The Secret War. How Trump uncovered the CIA's deadliest spy, Nightshade. Ever wondered how the CIA buries its deadliest secrets? Brace yourself for the unimaginable as Donald Trump, president, goes head-to-head with the world's most powerful intelligence agency to expose a conspiracy codenamed Nightshade. From a mysterious 1982 assassination attempt to a nameless spy, Ethan Wolfe, erased from history, and his daughter Elena Cruz, who saved Trump's life only to seek revenge. Every dark truth will unravel here. If you dare to uncover the lies buried in shadows, subscribe now and hit that bell to join us until the final explosive reveal. The morning sun cast long shadows across the sprawling grounds of the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. It was a crisp autumn day, and the air carried the faint scent of fallen leaves. Inside the secure facility, agents moved with purpose, their footsteps echoing softly against polished marble floors. The atmosphere was calm but charged. A typical day at the heart of America's intelligence operations. That is, until Donald Trump walked in. No one saw him coming. Not the guard stationed at the entrance, not the receptionist behind her bulletproof glass, and certainly not Director Amanda Pierce, who was halfway through a briefing on international cyber threats. He strode into the lobby like he owned the place, his signature red tie catching the light as he moved. A small entourage trailed behind him, two Secret Service agents looking equally bewildered by their charge's sudden decision to visit the Central Intelligence Agency unannounced. "Good morning," Trump said loudly, his voice carrying an unmistakable tone of authority. "I'm here about Nightshade." The room froze. Agents stopped mid-conversation. Phones were lowered from ears. Even the hum of fluorescent lights seemed to dim momentarily. For a man known for making bold entrances, this might have been his boldest yet. A young agent named Ryan Mitchell stepped forward hesitantly. His badge gleamed under the overhead lighting, though his expression betrayed confusion rather than confidence. "Sir. Mr. President," he stammered, unsure whether protocol still applied to someone no longer holding office. "We weren't expecting you. Can I assist you?" Trump waved a dismissive hand, already scanning the room as if searching for something, or someone. "Nightshade," he repeated firmly, enunciating each syllable as though speaking to a particularly slow child. "You know who that is, don't you?" Ryan exchanged a glance with another agent nearby, both clearly out of their depth. Sir. I'm afraid I don't have any information on that name. Perhaps if you could clarify what you're referring to." "Oh, cut the crap," Trump interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "Don't play dumb with me. You people think you can hide everything, but let me tell you something, I've got instincts. And my instincts say Nightshade exists. So where is he?" By now, a small crowd had gathered around the scene. Whispers rippled through the group, some agents discreetly pulling out their phones to alert higher-ups. Meanwhile, Trump stood tall, radiating a mix of indignation and determination. To anyone watching, it might have seemed absurd. A former president storming into the CIA demanding answers about a name that sounded more like a codename from a spy novel than anything real. But there was something in his demeanor, a fierce certainty that made even the most skeptical pause. Director Amanda Pierce arrived moments later, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she approached. Her sharp features and tailored suit gave her an air of command, but her eyes betrayed irritation. She didn't bother hiding it. "Mr. Trump," she began coolly, "this is highly irregular. What exactly are you doing here?" He turned to face her, his gaze unwavering. "I told your boy over there. I'm here about Nightshade. And trust me, Amanda, I'm not leaving until I get some answers." Pierce raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a faint smirk. "Nightshade? I'm sorry, but I have no idea what you're talking about. That name doesn't appear in any of our records." Trump leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, though loud enough for those nearby to hear. "That's because you've buried it. Buried him. But I remember. I remember everything." For a brief moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Pierce straightened, her professional mask slipping back into place. "If you'll excuse me, Mr. Trump, I need to return to my duties. This isn't a game, and we don't have time for wild goose chases." With that, she turned on her heel and began walking away. But Trump wasn't done. "You can walk away all you want, Amanda," he called after her, his voice ringing out across the lobby. But mark my words, I'll prove it. Nightshade exists, and when I find him, everyone will know the truth. As Pierce disappeared down a corridor, the tension in the room slowly dissipated. Agents resumed their tasks, though many couldn't resist stealing curious glances at the former president. Trump remained standing there for a moment longer, his jaw set in defiance. Then, with a final sweep of his piercing gaze, he turned and exited the building, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a growing sense of unease. Unbeknownst to anyone present, hidden deep within the recesses of the CIA archives, a single file labeled Project Nightshade sat untouched, its contents sealed away for decades. Somewhere, somehow, someone knew the truth, and Donald Trump was determined to uncover it. The memory hit Donald Trump like a freight train, unbidden but vivid, as he sat alone in his private jet later that evening. The events at the CIA headquarters still lingered in his mind, but now another scene began to unfold, one buried deep within the recesses of his past. It was the night of October 17, 1982, in the heart of Detroit's crumbling industrial district. At the time, Trump had been a young real estate mogul on the rise, eager to expand his empire into new territories. He had traveled to Detroit under the guise of scouting properties, though rumors suggested he was also negotiating deals with shadowy figures tied to organized crime. The details were murky even to him now, but one thing remained crystal clear: the ambush. It had started innocently enough. Trump stepped out of his limousine into the cold autumn air, flanked by 2 bodyguards. The street was eerily quiet, lined with abandoned warehouses and flickering streetlights. His destination was an old nightclub called the Velvet Veil, rumored to be neutral ground for high-stakes negotiations. But as they approached the entrance, something felt off. Too quiet, too still. Then chaos erupted. A group of masked men emerged from the shadows, their movements swift and coordinated. They carried weapons, knives glinting in the dim light, and surrounded Trump and his guards without hesitation. One of the bodyguards reached for his gun, but it was too late. A blade flashed, and the man crumpled to the ground, clutching his side. The other guard tried to fight back, only to be overwhelmed within seconds. Trump found himself backed against the wall, his heart pounding in his chest. For all his bravado, he knew this could very well be the end. The leader of the assailants stepped forward, his voice muffled behind the mask. "You shouldn't have come here," he growled. "But don't worry, we won't kill you." "Not yet." Before Trump could respond, a blur of motion descended upon them. It happened so fast he barely registered it. A figure clad in black leaping from the rooftop above, landing gracefully amidst the attackers. The newcomer moved with precision, striking with calculated efficiency. Within moments, the masked men were incapacitated, groaning or unconscious on the pavement. Trump stared in disbelief as the figure turned toward him. Beneath the hood, he caught a glimpse of sharp eyes and a determined expression. The person, whoever they were, was young, perhaps no older than 25. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the stranger spoke. "You need to live," they said, their tone urgent but firm. "This country needs you." Before Trump could utter a word, the figure vanished into the night, leaving him shaken but alive. Years later, sitting in the plush leather seat of his jet, Trump replayed the moment over and over in his mind. Who was that person? Why had they saved him? And what did they mean by "this country needs you"? These questions had haunted him for decades, driving him to seek answers, even if it meant barging into the CIA uninvited. But there was more to the story than he realized. Unbeknownst to Trump, the mysterious savior had not acted out of altruism. Her name was Elena Cruz, a prodigy hacker who had infiltrated criminal networks across the United States. At the time of the ambush, she had been tracking the same group that targeted Trump, gathering evidence of their illegal activities. Saving him had been incidental, a split-second decision born of necessity rather than heroism. Yet, as she watched Trump from afar in the weeks that followed, Elena began to see something in him. A spark. A potential for greatness or destruction. She didn't trust him, not entirely, but she believed in the possibility of change. Perhaps, she thought, this brash businessman could become the leader America desperately needed. Little did either of them know, their paths would cross again. And when they did, the stakes would be far higher than either could imagine. The meeting room at CIA headquarters was as sterile as it was intimidating. White walls, fluorescent lighting, and a long mahogany table dominated the space. Donald Trump sat at one end, his posture rigid, his eyes locked onto Amanda Pierce, who stood at the head of the table. Her expression was calm, almost serene, but there was an undercurrent of irritation in her voice as she addressed him. "Mr. Trump," she began, her tone measured but firm, "I've already told you, there is no record of anyone by the name of Nightshade in our archives. Whoever this person is or was, they don't exist in our system." Trump leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "That's where you're wrong, Amanda. I know what I saw that night in Detroit. Someone saved my life. Someone who called themselves Nightshade. You can deny it all you want, but I'm not leaving until I get answers." Pierce sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose as if dealing with a particularly stubborn child. "Look, Mr. Trump, I understand your frustration, but the fact remains that if this Nightshade existed, they would have left some trace. A file, a report, something. We've checked every database, every archive. There's nothing." Trump's jaw tightened. He didn't believe her for a second. The CIA had always been a master of concealment, burying secrets so deep they might as well never have happened. But he wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not when he was so close to uncovering the truth. As the conversation continued, Trump reached into his suit jacket to pull out a handkerchief. But instead of the cloth, his fingers brushed against something unexpected. A folded piece of paper tucked into the inner pocket of his blazer. Frowning, he pulled it out and unfolded it. The note was brief, written in neat, blocky letters. "Saving you was a mistake." Trump froze, his heart skipping a beat. The words were chilling in their simplicity, yet they carried an undeniable weight. Who had slipped this into his pocket? And when? Pierce noticed the change in his demeanor immediately. "What is it?" she asked, her curiosity piqued despite herself. Trump hesitated, then held up the note for her to see. "Does this look familiar to you?" Pierce's eyes narrowed as she read the message. For a split second her mask of composure slipped, revealing a flicker of unease. But just as quickly she regained control, her expression smoothing over once more. "No," she said flatly. "It doesn't. Where did you find it?" "In my pocket," Trump replied, his voice low. "Someone wanted me to see this. Someone who knows more than they're letting on." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Pierce crossed her arms, her mind racing. She couldn't afford any leaks or loose ends. Not with someone like Trump sniffing around. If this note was genuine, and she had no reason to doubt it, it meant that whoever was behind it was playing a dangerous game. For Trump, the note raised more questions than answers. Why would someone save his life only to regret it later? Was Nightshade acting out of personal motives? Or was there something darker at play? Could it be possible that their actions were tied to some larger conspiracy, one that even the CIA couldn't fully contain? As the meeting adjourned without resolution, Trump stepped outside, the note still clutched in his hand. The autumn air was crisp, carrying with it the faint scent of damp leaves. He stared off into the distance, his thoughts swirling. Whoever Nightshade was, they weren't just a savior or a shadow. They were a puzzle, a riddle wrapped in contradictions. Had they saved him because they believed in his potential to change America? Or was it something more sinister? Perhaps they had ulterior motives, using him as a pawn in a much larger game. One thing was certain. The deeper Trump dug, the more tangled the web became. And somewhere in that labyrinth of secrets, the truth about Nightshade waited to be uncovered. The sun was setting over the rugged landscape of rural Virginia when Donald Trump arrived at a modest cabin nestled deep within the woods. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and the faint sound of classical music drifted through the crisp evening air. This was the home of Samuel Blackwood, a retired CIA operative whose mind was as fragmented as the shattered mirror hanging crookedly on the wall inside. Trump had heard whispers about Samuel, once one of the agency's sharpest minds, now reduced to a shadow of his former self due to a mysterious condition that left him struggling to recall even the simplest details of his past. But despite his deteriorating memory, Samuel retained fragments of knowledge that others had long forgotten. And Trump needed those fragments now more than ever. Samuel greeted him at the door, his piercing blue eyes clouded with confusion but still sharp enough to recognize the man standing before him. "Mr. Trump," he said slowly, as if testing the name on his tongue. What brings you here? I need your help, Trump replied without preamble. I'm looking for someone, or something they call Nightshade. At the mention of the name, Samuel's expression shifted. For a moment it was as though a veil had lifted, revealing a flicker of clarity behind his foggy gaze. He gestured for Trump to follow him inside. The interior of the cabin was cluttered yet oddly organized, with stacks of old files, photographs, and maps covering nearly every surface. Samuel shuffled over to a desk and began rifling through piles of papers, muttering under his breath. Nightshade, yes, I remember now. Or at least I think I do. He pulled out a faded document, its edges worn from years of handling. On it was a list of code names, each accompanied by brief descriptions. One entry stood out: Project Phantom Agent. They called them ghost agents, Samuel explained, his voice trembling slightly. These were operatives recruited specifically for missions so sensitive that their existence had to be erased afterward. No records, no identities, nothing. They became shadows, tools used and discarded by the agency. Trump's eyes narrowed. And Nightshade? Was he one of these ghosts? Samuel hesitated, his fingers tracing the words on the page as if trying to piece together a puzzle. If Nightshade existed, and I'm not saying he did, he would have been part of this program. Operatives like him were trained to disappear completely after completing their assignments. Some vanished forever. Others, well, let's just say they didn't always get the chance to walk away. Trump leaned forward, his interest piqued. Where can I find more information about this project? There has to be something, some record, some clue, that proves Nightshade is real. Samuel sighed, rubbing his temples as if warding off an impending headache. There's only one place left where such secrets might still exist. The vault. The vault, Trump echoed. It's a secure archive buried deep beneath the Nevada desert, Samuel continued. Built during the Cold War, it was designed to store classified documents too dangerous to keep anywhere else. If there's any trace of Nightshade, or Project Phantom Agent, it'll be there. Without hesitation, Trump stood up. Then that's where we're going. The journey to the vault was anything but straightforward. After hours of driving through desolate highways and winding dirt roads, they finally reached their destination. A nondescript steel door embedded in the side of a rocky hill. The entrance was unmarked, save for a keypad and a security camera mounted above it. Samuel entered a series of numbers into the keypad, his hands shaking slightly. With a low hum, the door slid open, revealing a dimly lit corridor leading downward. The air grew colder as they descended deeper underground, the walls lined with reinforced concrete and flickering fluorescent lights. Inside, row upon row of metal shelves stretched endlessly in every direction, each filled with dusty folders and sealed boxes. It was a labyrinth of secrets, a graveyard of truths buried by time and intention. This is it, Samuel murmured, his voice barely audible over the oppressive silence. Whatever you're looking for, it's down here somewhere. For hours they combed through the archives, searching for any mention of Nightshade or Project Phantom Agent. Trump's frustration mounted with each passing minute. But then, just as he was about to give up, Samuel stumbled upon a box labeled Classified Phantom Ops. Inside was a collection of photographs, documents, and audio recordings, all tied to the Ghost Agent program. Among them was a single file marked Subject, Ethan Wolfe, along with a handwritten note scrawled across the top, deemed expendable, terminated. Trump stared at the file, his mind racing. Whoever Ethan Wolfe was, he hadn't simply disappeared. He had been erased. Sacrificed for reasons unknown, his life reduced to a few scraps of paper buried in the darkness. As they packed up the materials to take with them, Samuel turned to Trump, his expression grave. Be careful, Mr. Trump. Whatever you uncover here, it won't make you many friends. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. Trump nodded, but his resolve remained unshaken. I didn't come this far to turn back now. If Nightshade exists, and I believe he does, I'll find him. No matter what it takes. Back in Samuel Blackwood's cabin, Donald Trump sifted through the documents they had retrieved from the vault. The air was thick with anticipation as they examined each file, searching for any clue that could lead them closer to uncovering the truth about Nightshade. Then, tucked inside a yellowed envelope, Trump found something unexpected: a photograph. The image was faded but clear enough to make out the figures. It was taken in 1982 at a bustling street corner in Miami. In the photo, a younger Trump stood beside a striking young woman with piercing eyes and an enigmatic smile. Her face seemed familiar, though he couldn't immediately place it. On the back of the photograph, written in neat cursive, were the words, Elena Cruz, June 1982. Trump's breath caught in his throat. Samuel, he said sharply, holding up the photo. Do you recognize this woman? Samuel squinted at the image, his hands trembling slightly as he took the photograph from Trump. For a moment he simply stared, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, his knees buckled, and he collapsed into a nearby chair. His face had gone pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. She's, Samuel stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. She's Nightshade's daughter. Trump froze, his mind racing. What do you mean? Who is she? Samuel took a deep breath, steadying himself before speaking. Her name is Elena Cruz. She's the daughter of Ethan Wolfe, Nightshade himself. And if my memory serves me right, he hesitated, his voice cracking under the weight of the revelation. You're the reason her father is dead. The room seemed to spin around Trump as Samuel's words sank in. He remembered now, fragments of a distant memory resurfacing like shards of broken glass. Back in 1975, during one of his early real estate deals in New Orleans, Trump had unknowingly partnered with a corrupt businessman tied to organized crime. The deal had gone south, resulting in a violent confrontation that left several people dead, including a man named Ethan Wolfe, who had been investigating the criminal syndicate as part of a covert CIA operation. I didn't know, Trump murmured, more to himself than to Samuel. I didn't even know his name. Samuel nodded grimly. That's because they erased him. After his death, the agency scrubbed every record of Ethan Wolfe's existence. But Elena, she never forgot. She grew up believing you were responsible for her father's murder. That's why she saved your life in Detroit, to exact revenge. Trump clenched his fists, anger and guilt warring within him. But then why didn't she kill me? If she hated me so much, why let me live? Samuel shook his head. I don't know. Maybe something changed her mind. Maybe she saw something in you worth saving. As the two men sat in silence, processing the gravity of the revelation, Trump's thoughts turned inward. He remembered the night in Detroit, the way Elena had looked at him before disappearing into the shadows. There had been no malice in her gaze, only a strange mixture of determination and regret. Perhaps Samuel was right. Perhaps Elena had realized that Trump wasn't the monster she'd imagined him to be. Or perhaps there was another motive entirely, one that neither of them could yet comprehend. Whatever the truth might be, one thing was certain. Elena Cruz was far more than just the daughter of Nightshade. She was a key player in this tangled web of secrets, and her actions would continue to shape the course of events in ways neither Trump nor Samuel could predict. The fire crackled softly in the hearth of Samuel Blackwood's cabin, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Donald Trump sat rigidly in his chair, his mind still reeling from the revelations about Elena Cruz and her connection to Nightshade. But Samuel wasn't finished yet. There was more, far more, to the story than even Trump had anticipated. Ethan Wolfe, Samuel began, his voice low and deliberate, was one of the best operatives the CIA ever had. Brilliant, resourceful, fearless. He could blend into any crowd, disappear without a trace. That's why they recruited him for Project Phantom Agent. Trump leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. What was his mission? Samuel hesitated, as if weighing whether to continue. Finally, he sighed and reached for a folder on the table, a relic from the vault they had raided in Nevada. Inside were faded documents, photographs, and handwritten notes detailing Ethan's final assignment. In 1975, Ethan was sent to infiltrate a powerful crime syndicate operating out of New Orleans. At first it seemed like a routine operation, gather intelligence, identify key players, and report back. But then, he uncovered something far bigger than anyone expected. Trump frowned. What did he find? Samuel's expression darkened. Weapons smuggling. Not just small arms but high-grade military equipment being funneled through underground networks. And here's the kicker. It wasn't just the mob running the operation. The CIA was involved. The room fell silent, the the weight of Samuel's words hanging heavy in the air. Trump stared at him, disbelief warring with anger. You're telling me the agency was complicit in illegal arms deals? Samuel nodded grimly. It gets worse. When Ethan reported his findings, he was told to stand down. They claimed it was bigger than him, that exposing the truth would jeopardize national security. But Ethan refused to let it go. He started digging deeper, gathering evidence to expose the conspiracy. And that's when they turned on him, Trump said, his voice tight with realization. Yes, Samuel confirmed. They labeled him a rogue agent, a liability. Orders came down from the highest levels to neutralize the threat. Ethan didn't see it coming. He trusted them. One night, during what was supposed to be a routine extraction, he was ambushed by his own team. They staged his death, wiped all records of his existence, and buried the truth along with him. Trump clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. And Elena, she grew up believing I was responsible for her father's murder. Samuel nodded again. She was only 7 years old when it happened. All she knew was that you were somehow connected to the events that led to his downfall. For decades she carried that hatred, plotting her revenge. But then she saved my life, Trump murmured, his thoughts drifting back to the ambush in Detroit. Why? If she hated me so much, why didn't she let me die? That's the question, isn't it? Samuel replied, his tone tinged with uncertainty. Maybe she saw something in you worth saving. Or maybe... He trailed off, leaving the thought unfinished. Trump didn't press further. Instead, he stood up and paced the room, his mind racing. Every revelation brought him closer to understanding the tangled web of secrets surrounding Nightshade. But it also raised new questions. Who had slipped the anonymous note into his pocket? Why had they warned him that saving his life was a mistake? And most importantly, who else knew the truth about Ethan Wolfe? As the hours passed, Trump found himself staring at the photograph of Elena once more. Her piercing eyes seemed to bore into his soul, challenging him to uncover the answers hidden in plain sight. Whatever path lay ahead, one thing was certain. The CIA wasn't the ally he had always believed it to be. It was a shadowy organization capable of unspeakable acts, all in the name of protecting its secrets. For the first time, Trump realized the full extent of the danger he was in. If the agency could erase someone like Ethan Wolfe without hesitation, what chance did he have against them? Yet, despite the risks, he felt a spark of determination ignite within him. He owed it to Ethan and to Elena to bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. The tension in the air was palpable as Donald Trump stormed into Amanda Pierce's office at CIA headquarters. Gone was the bluster and bravado he had displayed during their earlier encounters. In its place was a cold, calculated fury. A man driven not by ego but by a burning need for justice. You knew, Trump said, slamming a folder onto her desk. Inside were the documents Samuel had uncovered in the vault, along with the photograph of Elena Cruz. You knew everything about Ethan Wolfe, didn't you? Amanda barely glanced at the folder. She leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable but her eyes betraying a flicker of unease. I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Trump. Don't play games with me. Trump snapped, his voice rising. Ethan Wolfe, Nightshade. He was one of your agents. He uncovered your dirty little secret about the arms smuggling operation in New Orleans. And instead of dealing with the problem, you dealt with him. For a moment there was silence. Then Amanda sighed, sitting up straighter. Her mask of professionalism slipped slightly, revealing the steely determination beneath. All right, fine. Yes, Ethan Wolfe existed. But you have no idea what was at stake. The weapons weren't just being sold to criminals. They were funding covert operations all over the world. Operations that kept this country safe. Safe? Trump repeated, incredulous. You call murdering one of your own agents safe? Ethan trusted you and you betrayed him. Amanda's gaze hardened. It wasn't personal, Mr. Trump. It was necessary. Ethan knew too much. If he'd gone public with what he'd discovered, it would have destroyed the agency and compromised countless lives. Trump took a step closer, his fists clenched at his sides. So you killed him. You erased him like he never existed. All to protect your precious secrets. Yes, Amanda admitted, her voice icy. And I'd do it again if I had to. The room seemed to shrink around them, the weight of her confession pressing down on both of them. Trump felt a surge of anger so intense it nearly overwhelmed him. But beneath the rage was something else. A deep sadness for the man who had been sacrificed, and for the daughter who had grown up believing Trump was responsible. And what about Elena? Trump demanded. Did you think about her? Did you care that she lost her father because of your orders? Amanda hesitated just for a fraction of a second. But when she spoke, her tone was as cold as ever. Elena was collateral damage. Just like Ethan. Sometimes, sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. Trump shook his head in disbelief. You're insane. You talk about the greater good, but all I see is greed and corruption. You didn't kill Ethan to protect America. You did it to protect yourselves. Before Amanda could respond, Trump turned and headed for the door. But as his hand touched the handle, she called after him. Be careful, Mr. Trump, she said, her voice low but laced with venom. You think you're doing the right thing, but you have no idea what you're up against. The truth isn't always black and white. And sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who'll stab you in the back. Trump paused, his grip tightening on the door handle. Without looking back, he stepped out into the hallway, leaving Amanda alone in her office. As the door clicked shut behind him, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had played her part perfectly. Now it was only a matter of time before the pieces fell into place, and Trump realized just how deep the rabbit hole went. The bright lights of Times Square illuminated the crisp autumn evening as a sea of reporters and onlookers gathered around the makeshift stage. Donald Trump stood at the podium, his posture commanding yet tinged with an uncharacteristic solemnity. Beside him, Elena Cruz adjusted her scarf, her piercing eyes scanning the crowd. This was it, the moment they had been working toward for weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, Trump began, his voice steady and resolute. Tonight, we reveal the truth about one of the darkest chapters in American history. A hush fell over the audience as he gestured to Elena, who stepped forward holding a stack of documents and digital files. On the large screen behind them, images of classified memos, bank records, and surveillance photos appeared, one after another, painting a damning picture of corruption within the CIA. The evidence laid bare the agency's involvement in illegal arms smuggling operations, implicating high-ranking officials, including Amanda Pierce. The man known only as Nightshade, a patriot named Ethan Wolfe, uncovered this conspiracy, Trump continued, his tone heavy with emotion. But instead of being hailed as a hero, he was betrayed by those he served. His life was erased, his legacy buried. All to protect the guilty. Elena took over, her voice calm but laced with quiet fury. My father sacrificed everything for this country. And when he tried to expose the truth, they silenced him. Tonight, we honor his memory by ensuring that his sacrifice was not in vain. As the presentation unfolded, gasps rippled through the crowd. Journalists furiously scribbled notes, cameras flashed, and murmurs of disbelief turned into a chorus of outrage. By the time Trump concluded his remarks, the atmosphere was electric, a mix of shock, anger, and admiration. Within hours, federal agents descended on CIA headquarters. Amanda Pierce was escorted out in handcuffs, her once immaculate suit now rumpled, her expression unreadable. As she climbed into the backseat of the police car, she paused and locked eyes with Trump, who stood nearby watching the scene unfold. You have no idea what you've unleashed, she said, her voice low but venomous. You think you're saving the world, Mr. Trump, but you're just playing into someone else's hands. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. Before Trump could respond, the door slammed shut, and the car sped away, leaving him standing alone amidst the chaos. Her words lingered in his mind like a dark cloud, gnawing at the edges of his resolve. Later that night, as the euphoria of their triumph began to settle, Trump returned to his suite at a luxury hotel in Manhattan. He expected to find Elena waiting for him, ready to celebrate their hard-won victory. Instead, he found only silence, and a single envelope resting on the coffee table. Inside was a note written in familiar blocky letters. Sometimes the greatest battles are fought in the shadows. Thank you for giving me my father's justice, but my work is far from over. Trump's heart sank as he realized what it meant. Elena was gone. Just like her father before her, she had chosen to disappear, to become something more than herself. She was no longer just Elena Cruz. She was the new Nightshade. For a long moment, Trump stared out the window at the glittering skyline of New York City. The crowds outside were still cheering, unaware that the woman who had helped bring down one of the most powerful figures in American intelligence had vanished without a trace. He felt a strange mix of pride and sorrow. Pride that he had played a part in exposing the truth. Sorrow that the cost of that truth had been so high. And somewhere deep inside a flicker of unease, because if Elena was now Nightshade, then what did that mean for the future? Who would she target next? What secrets would she uncover? As dawn broke over the city, Trump made a silent vow. Whatever came next, he would be ready. But even as he said the words to himself, he couldn't shake the feeling that the game was far from over, and that the real enemy might still be lurking in the shadows. The East Room of the White House was bathed in soft golden light as dignitaries, politicians, and members of the press gathered for a historic occasion. At the center of it all stood Donald Trump, his expression uncharacteristically somber as he prepared to bestow the Presidential Medal of Freedom upon a man who had long been erased from history, Ethan Wolfe, the original Nightshade. A large portrait of Ethan hung behind the podium, its presence both haunting and inspiring. The image depicted a younger man with sharp features and piercing eyes, a man who had once dedicated his life to serving his country, only to be betrayed by those he trusted most. For many in attendance, this was their first glimpse of the man whose sacrifice had remained hidden for decades. Trump stepped up to the microphone, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Today we honor a true American hero," he began, pausing to let the weight of his words settle over the room. Ethan Wolfe gave everything for this nation. Not just his service but his identity, his legacy, and ultimately his life. He uncovered truths that others sought to bury, and in doing so he paid the ultimate price. He paused again, scanning the crowd before continuing. But Ethan's story does not end here. His courage has inspired us to take action, to ensure that no other operative is forgotten or forsaken. That is why I am proud to announce the establishment of the Fund for the Protection of Anonymous Operatives. This initiative will provide support and recognition for those who serve in the shadows, protecting our freedoms without seeking glory. The audience erupted into applause, though Trump barely heard it. His thoughts drifted to Elena Cruz, or rather, the woman who had once been Elena Cruz. She had vanished after the Times Square press conference, leaving behind only a cryptic note. Was she watching now, hidden somewhere in the crowd? Or had she already moved on to her next mission? As the ceremony concluded, Trump retreated to the privacy of the Oval Office. There on his desk lay another envelope, this one bearing the same blocky handwriting as before. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a brief message. "Your son is rising fast. Keep an eye on him. Some legacies are more dangerous than others." Trump's blood ran cold. His mind raced through the implications. Which son did she mean? And what exactly was Elena implying? Was this a warning or a threat? Before he could dwell on it further, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was his security team informing him of unusual activity surrounding one of his son's political campaigns. Apparently, someone had been quietly gathering intel, digging into finances, connections, and communications. The pieces began to fall into place. Elena wasn't just monitoring his family, she was preparing for something bigger. Something that might force Trump to confront the very system he had helped expose. Later that night, halfway across the world in Tokyo, Elena sat alone in a dimly lit apartment, staring at a secure laptop screen. A new message blinked into existence. "Prepare. Your next target, Donald Trump himself." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating for the first time since she had taken up her father's mantle. Targeting Trump would mean crossing a line she had never intended to cross. But deep down, she knew the truth. Nightshade was not just a person, it was a legacy, a chain of individuals bound by duty and sacrifice. And now it was her turn to carry that burden. As the city lights flickered outside her window, Elena made her decision. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on. Because in the shadows where Nightshade operated, there were no easy answers, only choices that shaped the course of history. Meanwhile, back in Washington, Trump gazed out at the illuminated Washington Monument, lost in thought. He had fought hard to bring justice to Ethan Wolfe and shine a light on the darkness within the CIA. But as he reflected on the events of recent weeks, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was only beginning. For every shadow he exposed, another seemed to emerge, more complex, more dangerous than the last. And somewhere in that labyrinth of secrets, Elena Cruz waited, watching, ready to strike. The game was far from over. The halls of the CIA headquarters in Langley were quiet, save for the soft echo of Donald Trump's footsteps as he approached the Wall of Honor. The wall was a solemn tribute to those who had given their lives in service to the agency, names etched into marble, each representing a life lost in the shadows. But there were no names here for the anonymous ones, the operatives erased from existence to protect secrets too dangerous to acknowledge. Trump stood before the wall, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the empty spaces between the names. He thought about Ethan Wolfe, the man who had once been Nightshade, a hero whose sacrifice had been buried alongside his identity. And now Elena Cruz had taken up that mantle, stepping into the void left by her father to continue the fight. The truth always has two sides, Trump murmured to himself, his voice barely audible in the cavernous room. But I choose the brighter path. Yet, even as he spoke the words, doubt lingered in his mind. How much of what he believed was truly light, and how much was merely an illusion crafted by those who thrived in darkness? The events of recent weeks had shown him that the line between hero and villain was thinner than he had ever imagined. He had exposed corruption within the CIA, brought justice to Ethan Wolfe, and established a fund to protect anonymous operatives. But at what cost? As if on cue, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was another cryptic message, this time from an unknown sender. Every action creates a ripple. Be careful which waves you choose to ride. Trump frowned, slipping the phone back into his pocket without responding. Whoever was watching him knew more than they should. Was it Elena? Or someone else entirely? The thought sent a chill down his spine. Halfway across the world, in a dimly lit apartment overlooking Tokyo's bustling streets, Elena sat alone, her laptop screen casting a pale glow across her face. She stared at the latest encrypted message, its contents both inevitable and unsettling. Prepare. Your next target, Donald Trump himself. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating for the first time since she had embraced her new identity as Nightshade. Targeting Trump would mean crossing a line she had never intended to cross. He wasn't just a politician, he was the man who had fought alongside her to expose the truth about her father. And yet, the message was clear. Someone, perhaps the same shadowy figures who had orchestrated Ethan Wolfe's demise, wanted Trump silenced. Elena leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes as memories flooded her mind. She remembered the night in Detroit when she had saved him, fueled by hatred and a desire for revenge. She remembered the moment she had changed her mind, realizing that Trump was not the monster she had imagined. And now she found herself caught in a web far larger than herself, a cycle of secrets and betrayals that seemed destined to repeat itself. Was this what it meant to be Nightshade? To exist in the gray areas, where morality blurred and every choice carried consequences too heavy to bear? If so, then perhaps her father's fate had been inevitable. Perhaps hers would be too. Back in Langley, Trump turned away from the Wall of Honor, his thoughts heavy with uncertainty. He had always prided himself on his ability to see through deception, to cut through the noise and find the truth. But now he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something, that the real enemy was closer than he realized. As he stepped outside into the crisp autumn air, he glanced up at the sky, dotted with stars. Somewhere out there, Elena was watching, waiting. And somewhere closer, perhaps within his own circle of allies, another player was moving pieces on the board, setting the stage for the next act in this endless game. Trump climbed into his car, the weight of leadership pressing down on him like never before. He had uncovered the truth about Nightshade, but in doing so he had become part of the legacy, a legacy defined by sacrifice, secrecy, and the unrelenting pursuit of justice. But was he the hero of this story? Or merely another pawn in a conspiracy that would never truly end? The car pulled away from the curb, disappearing into the night. And in the distance, a single figure watched from the shadows, their presence unnoticed but undeniable. The cycle continued. But as the clock ticks, who holds the dagger now? Is Nightshade a guardian or a ghost? The chessboard is set. Stay alert, the next move will rewrite history.